if Kennedy is not here, we can now officially jump into the next session. I request my colleague to move to the next slide. I want to take this moment to now officially introduce our trainer who will be taking us through this second session. So if you missed the first session, brace yourself. We had a good session on the first day. We were able to learn. We were able to be taken through a session where we were empowered, to get the knowledge that we need to run the HR departments on our end. So without further ado, let me introduce the trainer for today, who is Mr. Greg Otieno. So Greg Otieno holds a master's degree in political science and a postgraduate degree in HR, with over 20 years of experience both in practice as HR of the human function in the NGO space and a consultant in the private sector. So as people in the NGO space, we already know we are dealing with an experienced individual who is able to understand us in the space that we are in. Second of all, he recently was a HR advisor for the Women Lift Health, a global advocacy. Just go back to the introduction. A global advocacy as the HR specialist for the East African hub. And then last but not least, he was able to develop a HR and administration training manual with KCDF and Light Up Impact, who are part of the partners that are the one organizing this webinar. So, Greg, I allow you to take this opportunity to take us through the session, and then I will be coming back once you are done. So, Greg, I hand it over to you, and I officially leave this.
Maybe, Jennifer, before Greg, I had a technical hitch. I'm back now. Can I just say a word before Greg takes over?
Please do, Kennedy. You're most welcome.
Okay, thank you. I would like to welcome all to the second session of our HR training, HR and admin. For those who are in the first session, we got a lot of encouraging feedback that the training was very impactful and very informative. And we hope that we are looking forward to building from what we learned in the first session, in this session, to kind of reinforce some of the HR principles in terms of discipline management, performance management, and issues around development and talent management. So we really look forward to having additional skills and knowledge on how do we manage our HR and admin docket. I know for those who missed the first session, you still have an opportunity to get into that session when our portal will be up and running, which will be informing all participants at some point. We'll be having an online portal in the next few weeks with all these trainings, training content and materials, so that we allow people who missed the first session to log in and do assessment of self-training when it comes to HR and admin policy. Otherwise, welcome. And we look forward to a very interactive and a very interactive session where people will get a lot of information to help improve their admin and HR functions in their respective organizations. Otherwise, karibuni tena, and looking forward to a very interactive session with all of you. Asante, Jennifer, and for being patient with me, and karibuni sana.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. We really needed that, welcoming remarks for just to understand where we are. So I think right now the participants have been welcomed. They already know what's happening. And that was Kennedy from KCDF. Officially, let me now hand it over to Greg, who will be taking us through this training. Greg, on to you as I also sit back and learn more from this session. Most welcome, Greg.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer and Kennedy, for the opening remarks. I would also like to welcome those that we were with on Wednesday, and hope that you build on to what you learned from Wednesday. And also anybody who is here that wasn't there, karibu sana, most welcome. Now, to kick off, I just want to have an overview, share an overview of where we've been The first day, on Wednesday, we did an introduction to the HR function, looked at the pillars and setup of the HR structure. And then we also delved lightly on the HR manual. And this is at the center of everything, because all things HR must be captured or they are stored in the HR manual. We tackled 3 policies. That's the recruitment and selection policy, code of conduct policy, and conflict management. Now, in this second session, I'll start off with a highlight, a recap of what we looked at, possibly just the elements of those 3 policies. And then we will be focusing on disciplinary policy, performance management, and subsequently training and development and talent management. I know this is an area that in your space, you training and development, you do a lot of this from a capacity development perspective, and I know your focus is usually mainly for partners or externals. Our focus will be for internal resources, not the externals. But I'm sure it will be easy for you to relate. Okay. There's a pre-session survey that will be shared. A link will be shared so that we can be able to effectively measure what we are doing with regard to your expectations. So please take a minute to fill in the pre-session survey. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, very brief recap of what we covered last time so that we can be able to transition properly to what we are doing today, what we're focusing on today. Now, pillars of HR. We looked at recruitment and selection. This, like I mentioned, is critical or key because it's the entry point to any organization. And then, of course, training and development. This we looked at high level because it was just as a pillar, but we're going to delve into this at length today. We looked at, I mentioned performance management as a key pillar, high level. It is an area of focus today. Employee engagement and compliance and legal issues are also some of the key pillars of the HR function. Now, we looked at, like I mentioned, we looked at recruitment and selection policy, code of conduct, and conflict management. Some of the key elements that we looked at in recruitment and selection included job descriptions. This is basically a definition of responsibilities and required qualifications for the role. So a job description would basically look at the role profile, the profile of the person that is required for them to be able to deliver in that role. And then we'll also look at the sourcing of candidates, the methods of sourcing that included advertising, word of mouth, using different social media platforms. We looked at the interview process, which must be structured, fair, and how assessments are done to arrive at the ideal candidate. We also looked at the selection criteria, which must be very clear so that it inspires confidence that the process is above board, and also onboarding as a key element of recruitment. With regard to conflict management policy, we looked at as an element, we looked at the importance of understanding the conflict, the type of conflict that you're addressing. Conflict resolution styles, we looked at accommodating, avoiding, collaboration, compromising. And remember I said, these are styles that are applied, not necessarily what is recommended. I did go through the recommended styles, and then effective communication, this is important, mediation, and negotiation as one of tools to resolve disputes and create win-win solutions. And then there was a conflict resolution framework where we looked at the steps to address conflict. And finally, we looked at code of conduct. You will find that there are certain similarities between code of conduct and disciplinary policy. However, I'll go into that. As an element, some of the elements of code of conduct included ethical behavior and integrity. This included confidentiality as well, accountability, holding staff to account, including partners if your code of conduct is broad-based that way. And then there's health and safety, including conflict of interest management. So those are some of the elements that are useful in a code of conduct. So before we jump into the disciplinary policy, what I would like to do is to have a bit more interaction from the participants than we did on Wednesday. Now, I'd like to have this at when we finished with the first, well, at each policy, where at the group activity point, we would listen to any critical pain point that a participant has experienced in their organizations or previous organizations that would like a solution for. Now, instead of me responding to them directly, I would like other participants who have had similar incidences to be able to share the experience and what solutions they provided. Because you'll find that a lot of times the solutions are within, not without. Then, of course, after that, we'll go into the Q&A where I'll be able to share my experiences. You'll be able to ask questions and I share my experiences and, recommendations. Right, disciplinary policy. This is, in my view, is one of the most critical policies in the HR function, mainly because it drives culture in an organization, and it also has legal implications. So if handled poorly, it can result in broken down systems and, of course, legal exposure. Now, the objective for this session with regard to disciplinary policy is for you as participants to understand the key elements of the policy and how to apply it fairly and effectively in your organization so that you can benefit from it. Now, the universal purpose of a disciplinary policy is to establish clear behavioral patterns, ensure fair and consistent handling of any infractions by staff, and also promote transparency and accountability in addressing corrective actions. So that's the key, that's the universal purpose of this policy. The idea is not to surprise staff with things that they didn't know were in place or they were in the rule book. So what really happens normally in a lot of organizations, when a new hire comes through, they have to sign, they have to be exposed to the HR manual so that they're very clear on which rules are in effect. Now, this, you remember, is also a practice that is recommended for the code of conduct. So I said this, you can draw a parallel between the two. All right. We are going to go into the elements of disciplinary policy. These are some of the elements that, in my view, must be considered when you're developing a policy in this area. So the first element is standards of conduct. Standards of conduct basically are expected behavior by employees in the workplace. These standards clarify what is acceptable and what constitutes unacceptable behavior. And typically, these are aligned to organizational values and goals. Now, standards of behavior can be divided into two categories. One level is normally minor misconduct, and the other is major. Now, minor misconduct would include, lateness. However, you need to realize that there's lateness that can be managed, but there's perennial lateness that impacts productivity, and therefore will very quickly transition to a major misconduct. Now, other minor misconduct, other infractions that can be categorized under minor misconduct include unapproved absence and other minor policy violations. Major misconduct are theft, harassment, violence, gross negligence, or breach of conduct. You will find that in the labor laws, especially in Kenya and our East African region, they have clearly highlighted this major misconduct and what needs to happen when this happens, when there's an infraction of such. So these are clearly regulated. The setting up of clear standards of conduct is very important to establish the foundation of a fair, productive work environment. This makes expectations to the staff or the new hire very explicit so that there is no gray area. Now, in a disciplinary policy, there is no middle point. It is black and white. So, and that is why this is a policy that keeps evolving, because there are new incidences that keep coming up that must now be addressed in the policy. Now, some of the benefits of this policy include setting clear expectations. Employees will be able to understand behaviors and actions that are required to maintain a professional and respectful workplace, because without that, you will not be able to move forward as an organization. It will also, like I mentioned, it is black and white, so it reduces misunderstandings. That, look, I didn't know. Staff typically would say, I didn't know this was an infraction. But this, with a very clear policy in the disciplinary area, you will be able to mitigate that. Now, it also, most importantly, promotes accountability amongst staff. Okay. Another component is, and a very key one, is disciplinary procedures. For minor issues, disciplinary action is recommended to be addressed informally, if you could say, such as through coaching sessions or verbal warnings or simply peer intervention. So those would address minor infractions, such as the recurring lateness, to support improvement of time management. Now, the use of one-on-one sessions and verbal warnings and discussions helps in promoting a collaborative approach to problem solving, and also fosters stronger employee-manager relations, and also prevents minor issues from escalating unnecessarily. Because what you do not want is to have all issues to be considered as major. Then it means there's a breakdown either in the policy that exists, or there's a breakdown in how it is applied by line managers or line supervisors. Now, the formal step will now focus on the important or the major infractions. Now, the formal step has a linkage to minor infractions. For example, you would start off, while handling minor issues, you would start off with verbal warnings or discussions. Then if it escalates, then you move on to document through written warning letters. Now, I'd like to point out that verbal discussions or verbal warnings must be documented as well. Because if you don't document it, then nobody will know that this ever took place, and it cannot be, you lose the opportunity to track it. So there'd be the written warnings, and then there's the final warnings, and action is taken either to suspend or terminate. Now, in some organizations, there's a number of warning letters that staff has to be given for it to arrive at the final warning. So this differs from organizations to organizations. Typically, a lot of organizations apply 2 warning letters, then a third one becomes final. And then there's also a time gap between each warning letter. So there's, if you issue 1 warning letter, then the second one, if there's a second infraction within a certain period of time, then it's considered a second warning letter. You do realize that you can't give a warning. It's unrealistic to give a warning letter in 2024, then go into 2025 and decide that you're giving a second warning letter. So there's an expiry component in that. We can discuss this further in the discussions if you wish. Some of the benefits of addressing this this way includes transparent and structural process for escalating disciplinary action, because then you have documentation and you can be able to draw a graph and indicate that there's been attempts by the organization to address these issues, and this is where you've arrived at. And also, it also ensures consistency and fairness in applying the consequences. So everybody knows that if this infraction will trigger this outcome, and then also it protects the organization. Most importantly, it protects the organization from claims of bias or favoritism. I'll go into the next element, which is investigation process. This is unavoidable and very important, because for you to understand the issues, an investigation process, a step-by-step gathering and verification of facts must be undertaken, so that the key aspects are considered on their merits. And then one of the key things that needs to be highlighted during this process is impartiality, confidentiality, and adherence to established protocols. Okay. Now, typically, you'll find that infractions emanate from a line manager or supervisor, and then they escalate it to the HR function, whether it is a fully fledged function or someone handling the HR duties. Then at that point, that is the body that is, or that's the authority that is mandated to conduct this investigation. Now, without an impartial or thorough investigation, there's a risk of unfair actions that would lead to mistrust all across the workforce, and also reduced morale, and ultimately, there could be legal challenges. Now, the benefits, why we need to have this process is because it builds trust across employees and also minimizes, legal exposure. Okay. The other element of disciplinary process is consequences of misconduct. There's need for clear communication of the range of disciplinary measures that may be applied, from warnings to termination. All right, so that everybody knows, both staff and line managers are aware that these options are available to them, and the staff are aware that they may trigger these disciplinary actions or measures if they go against laid down regulations. Now, this is important because it also brings in consistency and demonstrates to everybody that regardless of position or who you are or who you know, the organization values fairness. And so basically that enforces equity right across, also encourages accountability, and demonstrates commitment to values by the organization. The next element is the appeals process. This, I think, it's enshrined in natural law, where an employee who faces disciplinary action must have the opportunity to make an appeal based on, solid grounds. So this, you must work into the policy so that it doesn't go against the law, and also projects fairness. And it includes outlining the time frame for filing an appeal, the steps that are involved, and the decision-making authority for appeals. Now, I did mention this in our last session, that for you to be able to effectively develop a policy that includes an appeal process, it is recommended that the head of the organization is not involved in the disciplinary process, so that they can act as an authority that that appeals can be presented to, so that they can make a final decision based on factors that either the disciplinary committee, as may be set up by some organizations, or the HR function that is handling that disciplinary process may have missed out on, or to the larger benefit of the organization. Now, an appeals process similarly builds trust, also mitigates risk, and also strengthens morale across the staffing workforce. Now, the next element is to do with documentation. It is absolutely imperative that documentation of each and every step is undertaken. Because like I mentioned at the beginning, that there is a possibility, if things don't go well, that there might be legal implications. And even then, during the appeals process, if a case reaches that level, then it must be supported. The decision or recommendation must be supported based on documentation. So this is very important. So it brings legal protection. It also ensures consistency and also enhances transparency with clear records and trust of the disciplinary process. Finally, and also of importance, is compliance with labor laws. The practice in HR is at the very minimum, you must comply or meet the minimum of the labor laws. As you evolve and become, as the organization evolves, you can include rules and regulations in your disciplinary process or policy that goes above and beyond the labor laws of the country. However, you cannot be at cross purposes with the labor laws, so that there's no contradiction. The risk there, if you are, is that whatever it is you put in your policy becomes redundant and would be thrown out by law or in court. Okay. Our next, the next area that I'd like to tackle is the key steps. You need to consider key steps in developing a disciplinary process. I mentioned investigation at the very beginning. So you need to factor in a mechanism for investigation so that it's clear. Another step or aspect is notification. The staff needs to be formally informed that there's an alleged misconduct that has been escalated to the HR, that there is an issue. And this is right at the beginning of the initiation of the disciplinary process, so that there are clear details of the accusation and potential consequences are also communicated to the staff. Now, this promotes transparency and also clarifies the next steps in the process and any rights the employee may have, such as representation or access to the evidence so that they can interrogate it. Now, in some organizations, staff are allowed to get representation or witnesses for this process, and also it avoids accusatory language to ensure fairness. Now, this is useful in reducing misunderstandings and also builds trust in the disciplinary process by ensuring the employee is fully informed and cannot have any excuse in pointing out issues that don't exist at the outcome of the process. Now, the next step, the other step, key step, is the hearing process. The hearing process provides the employee with an opportunity to present their side of the story. The worst practice normally is when management automatically sides with line managers or line supervisors. Then it presents a problem. However, the hearing should be designed to be able to hear both sides of the story, so that they can come to an objective solution or recommendation. It is important to have neutral and non-threatening environment during this hearing. It is also important that the employee comes out feeling that they've been heard and respected during the process. And clearly, there's a clear outline of their input and how it has been considered during the hearing process. This also is good for strengthening the legitimacy of the process and also upholds fairness. Now, decision, you'd find the reality of it is that the HR function, if it's a case that leads to separation, the HR functions typically is not the final one. So it would make a recommendation to the head of the organization. However, if it falls within the disciplinary structure of the organization that exists in the organization, then the HR function would have the option of applying what is available to them within the structure that is available. This also is useful for consistency and also highlight the base of the decision on facts, evidence, and organizational policies. It also ensures that the decision reflects a balance between accountability and fairness. Useful for developing trust and staff morale, so that everybody knows they'll be treated fairly. Now, documentation at every step, this is key and cannot be avoided. Similarly, there's an appeal mechanism that must be included in the process. So with regard to the disciplinary policy, those are some of the factors that must be considered for it to be a successful one. Okay. Now, we want to go into the group activity. So I'd like to urge participants to share an incident or something they have experienced in their organizations that they would like us to have a look at and see how we can help out and give solutions or suggestions. So anybody can raise their hand so that we can give them the opportunity to share.
So great, I think we have someone who has raised their hand, Catherine. So Catherine will allow you to speak. We will just unmute you and then give you the opportunity to speak. So Catherine, go ahead.
Okay, please unmute Catherine. Catherine, as soon as that is done, please go ahead.
Catherine, can you try to unmute yourself? You should have this right now.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Mwalimu, for the lecture. So I am currently a programs manager in Okwasasa. We don't have HR. So I also play the role of HR. Recently, we had a conflict between two employees that also was a disciplinary issue. One employee was complaining that another employee was stealing things. So Okwasasa, we run shelters for women and girls that have experienced abuse. So one employee was complaining that the other employee was stealing things from the survivors. So that is like the food that we have for the shelters, clothes and things like that. And I got to know of that information when we were having a meeting with our caregivers from the shelters. Now, the person that reported the issue from the group reported somebody that was a bit higher on their rank. That was one. And then she was saying this and she was like, I'm sharing this in confidentiality. Then somebody from the group also went and told that person that was being reported. And then now that person also came up with their own story to defend themselves before we had the disciplinary meeting to try and find out what is what. They didn't even give me the time to investigate and see if that issue was true. Now my question was, what do I do to this person that gave out the information? And then also, how do I deal with also this person that is taking things from the survivors, things that have been donated for the survivors and they're taking for their own benefit? How do you handle such situations? Because you can warn them once or twice, but the habit still continues. And at the same time, you are conflicted between letting them go because of taking things like that and also trying to curb that behavior. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just curiosity before we ask someone in the group, the participants, to share a recommendation, what they think we should do. Do you have a policy, disciplinary policy?
At the moment, we don't. Now, after this, I'm going to develop. I just have like a small HR manual that is helping me manage. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there any evidence provided with regard to the theft?
Yes, there was evidence because also like survivors were complaining about the same thing.
All right.
Yeah.
Another question is, is the whistleblower protected, or his or her identity is out there in the open? I mean, the person that has been accused knows who.
Yeah, they know, and after they knew, they also like came up with stories to attack them.
To attack them. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody, the participants, anybody with an opinion or a suggestion on how this can be handled, or how you would handle it, or if you've had such an experience, how did you handle it? Feel free to raise your hand so that we can unmute.
Greg, there is something in the chat in response to this. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. Just go ahead.
Okay. Peter is writing, my thinking is that there is need for COA-SASA to have a disciplinary policy, code of conduct for the workers, and also a whistleblowing policy.
Absolutely. I do agree with that. Any other recommendation from the participants?
We have George. Yes, George, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
George?
Yeah, thank you. For me, the understanding is that whether there is an HR manual or there's a code of conduct or not, stealing is one of the things that is also mentioned in the Employment Act. It's unacceptable. And therefore, if there is evidence that staff is stealing, then I think there's no question about even handling them there again, because it will encourage others to do the same. So it's unacceptable, and that's one of the gross misconducts that can be handled accordingly. And according to the issues of the whistleblower protection now, from that scenario, it seems like in the sittings where there were discussions like that, then another person did not have confidentiality. That's why now they also brought it to the one who was suspected. And therefore, it means there's something to be handled about confidentiality and communication. Maybe some of the information needs to remain in a certain level before evidence is done. So that's something also to be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, George. It's obvious that you have clarity of thought with regard to that. George, you're in HR or you're in other areas of civil society?
I'm in the NGO, but I'm not in the HR.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Anybody with a contrary solution or recommendation before we give somebody else to share their challenges?
We have a few comments in the chat.
Okay.
Jacqueline is saying, I think even before they put a policy, they should go by Employment Act. The HR should terminate immediately or call for a disciplinary meeting before terminating contract. Catherine then is following, action should be taken against both parties. So to send a strong message against such a behavior. We have also Grace. It's very essential for the organization to develop incidents or grievance reporting procedures and should be trained to the staff and beneficiaries. Zachary, I think there is need for policy development to safeguard the organization's undertakings. Back to you.
Okay. All right. I think we'll go with that. And I by and large agree with the majority of what everybody else has said, that action is necessary. But I do empathize with you because you're doubling up. Your main role is in programs, right? But now you're doubling up and trying to address HR function activities. So I do realize that that can be a challenge because HR is a full-time job. Depending on the size of the organization, it can be given to somebody else to handle as you wait to hit a threshold to be able to either afford a full HR function or a dedicated HR resource. However, I agree with George and the rest that you risk reputational damage if no action is taken. So, like you've mentioned that after this, you're going to develop a policy. Please do take this as a trigger to develop and put in place a policy. However, you need to, recommendation is to let go of someone like that, because the people you're trying to help will also have that mentality that your organization is stealing from, is stealing from them. They may not look at it from an individual perspective, but make reference to your organization. So action needs to be taken based on the evidence available, and the whistleblowers also need to be protected. So as you're developing a disciplinary policy, also take the opportunity to develop a whistleblower policy as well. And that means that you should certainly take care of those before now the policies kick in. Okay. Any other issue that anybody has that would like to share with the group so that we try and provide a solution?
Can I share?
Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
This is Tobias.
And where are you from?
Tobias, I'm joined from the coastal region. I'm with the public operation, but I just developed an interest to join and have a listening on the current trends in the NGO. I've formerly been in the NGO before I joined the public operation.
Most welcome, please share.
I've listened to the speaker who raised a concern on the issue of theft, and mine is just I wanted to raise a concern if there possibility, because she mentioned of that they are now from this, they are now developing the intent. If not, then they are intending to develop a policy to curb the case that the company has undergone, which involves theft in relation to the goods that belong to the beneficiary. So then I kept wondering whether the policy they are developing is the one they want now to use to curb a current behavior, more particularly on the culprit. And then the question is, does a policy act in retrogressive? That is one. Two is I urge the non-government organization or any other organizations to be proactive and not reactive, in that they need to come in place, harmonize their documents to be up to date, to avoid these aspects of reactiveness, developing policies to either target individuals or work on to curb a behavior that has just occurred. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, thank you very much.
Allow me
Yes.
to just let you know that we have 5 minutes.
Yes.
I just wanted to keep in terms of time. We have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody wants to respond to Tobias before I do? I think particularly on the first point. Okay, fine. Tobias, I think for in this case, I do agree with you. I'll start from the bottom. I do agree with you that that a policy cannot work retrogressively. Yeah, a policy, if you try that, you'll run into trouble very quickly. A policy has a date, an effective date, so it cannot be developed today to be effective the 1st of January. However, theft is already regulated in the labor laws in Kenya, for example. So action can be taken with sufficient evidence. Action can be taken on this instance based on the existing labor laws. Okay, and thank you for your input for the NGO space. I'm sure they have had, there are almost 200 of them in attendance. Okay. Any last pain point or challenge someone would like us to have a look at before we move on to the question and answer component? Anybody, or we should just move on?
I think we can move because of time.
Okay. Any questions? Anything you'd like me to expound on a little bit more in the disciplinary policy?
Hi, Greg. We could start as the participants raise their hands with
Okay.
a few questions that I've collected from the chat.
All right.
So the first question is from Sylvia. Does the same disciplinary process apply to both staff and non-staff? Example, to employees, volunteers, interns, and consultants?
Okay. Could you go to the next question?
Yes, sure. The next question is from Tracy. What if the person that needs disciplinary action is the director or the CEO? Maybe his maybe he sleeps rude or comes to work to meetings drunk.
Okay. And the third one?
Third one, how do you come up with a salary scale for co-directors, managers, if the organizations rely on donor projects, which can be uncertain?
Okay. Okay, I'll take these three. Although the last one is a bit off, but I've had a bit of exposure in that area. Now, you'll find that the same disciplinary process will, by and large, apply to everybody across. Now, there are certain disciplinary components that may not apply to may not apply to volunteers, right? Because, for example, if a volunteer has stolen, and if a permanent and a contractual staff has stolen, Therefore, the disciplinary process will apply automatically to both equally, right? They'll all be let go. Okay. I've seen organizations in the NGO space where so there's dual practices. I've seen organizations in the NGO space where they also apply verbal interventions for both contractual and non-contractual and non-contractual staff, basically volunteers. However, there are organizations in the NGO space who hold the volunteers at a lower threshold, whereby if there's an infraction, they go against a regulation, then they basically let them go because they do not want to go through the tedious step of the disciplinary process for the contracted staff. So what this means is that if you want to go that route, I'm not saying that is wrong. If you want to go that route, you need to be able to clearly differentiate what applies to volunteers and what applies to contract staff. Because in your HR manual, one of the first things that you're going to do at the very beginning is to define the types of engagements that you have in the organization. There's contractual, there's some have casual staff, some have outsourced staff, and some have volunteers. So with that, as you come down to the disciplinary process, then you should be able to establish exactly what applies to which category of staff. Okay, because for example, if you have outsourced staff who do your cleaning, then disciplinary, they may not be subject to the same disciplinary process as well, because then you simply report them to your service provider, and that's taken care of there and then. I hope that answers that. Now, the second one with regard to whether if the person at fault is at director level or head of the organization, ideally they're all supposed to be subject to the same rules and regulations. Because remember, the disciplinary process and the HR manual cannot be effective if the head of the organization has not endorsed. So the moment they're going against their own rules, you may not have the firepower to address it. But like I said on Wednesday, everybody reports to somebody, right? I am not saying that you need to take it upon yourself to escalate as a HR or someone in charge of the HR function. You escalate that to the board or the trustees. Yeah. Some things in reality are beyond your pay grade, right? But it is useful to understand that all the laws, if it's someone at director level but is below the head of the organization, then it is your duty to report that to the head of the organization. Okay, because the head of the organization may not be in the know that one of the directors is coming in drunk. So the moment you receive that feedback from wherever, it is your duty to report, to escalate it up. If you don't, as the head of a HR function, then you have failed as well. Okay, it becomes tricky when it's the head of the organization who is having such problems. The other question was on how you come up with a salary scale based on the fact that most of the organizations are depend on donor funding. Now, there's a process called salary survey benchmarking. Now, with this process, it starts off with the organization identifying peer organizations. You know, the organizations that they can compare themselves with, that they're in the same space with regard to their activities. If they're dealing with refugees or they're dealing with gender. So basically, you start identifying your peer organizations, and another way of identifying them is organizations that you either get staffing from or you lose staff to. Then you conduct a benchmarking process. Now, with that benchmarking process, you'll get the market benchmark salaries. So you know that a project manager in a similar organization, operating in a similar environment, is paying this much. During the benchmarking, you need to drill down further and establish the profile of the donors that they have. Because you could be comparing yourself with an organization that has is being funded by the EU, while your funding source is not comparable. So then you'd have trouble competing or sustaining that kind of salary in the market. So it's important to be able to be clear on which market you're benchmarking against, so that it's reasonable and gives you actionable information for you to make a decision. All right. So now, when you get that data, you don't have to exactly match what is in the market. What you need to do is to do, because salary data is divided into 4 groups. There's the 25th, the 50th, and the 75th, of course, and above. You decide that as an organization, based on my donor availability, I can only play at the 50th percentile. That's about midpoint. Or I want to play just below the 50th. Or if you feel you have some grants coming through, then you can play at the 75th percentile. That's market leadership in salary. Okay. Any other questions?
So Greg, allow me, because of the interest of time, because there's a lot of activities in the chat, which I really want to appreciate the participants, because they're really putting in questions and also some few comments. So Valeria, if you can just pick one more question, and then once Greg has answered that, Greg, you can move on with the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Should we pick from the chat or?
Yes, Valeria is going to read it out.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me well? This is a question from Stephanie. So she's asking clarification. What did you say is the lifeline of a warning to an employee?
Okay. There's no hard and fast rule with regard to the lifeline of a warning, because it's not covered in the labor laws of Kenya. Now, what happens is that in the private sector, you'll find that the lifeline of a warning is regulated by the CBA, or the collective bargaining agreement, where there are unionized staff. In the NGO sector, when you're developing a disciplinary policy, you must have a discussion with the leadership, right? Leadership here would mean the senior management team. They make a recommendation to the head of the organization, so that you can adopt that in your policy. Now, typically, it ranges between 6 months and 8 months. That's what the practice is. It's not the rule, but it's what happens. That's the practice in the world of work. Okay, so I think we're going to move on in the interest of time. And our next policy is the performance management policy. This is a very tricky one, because in the private sector, it's very clear, because they deal with revenue, costs, and basically the bottom line. In the NGO sector, I think you mainly deal with burn rate, because your donors have given you, have funded you for specific activities. So therefore, if those activities, I mean, if you don't burn that cash, then it then means those activities didn't take place. So it's a key performance for you, but in converse. Okay, so our objective today with regard to performance management is we'd like you to understand the importance of performance management and now to implement it effectively so that employees are able to see the importance of it and contribute to the development and organizational success. Now, the reason why performance management is troublesome is because, number one, some organizations complicate performance management overly, such that even the employee is not able to understand what the process is. In my experience, it is critical that you adopt a very simple and straightforward policy and a system to support it. Okay. Now, the universal purpose of a performance management policy is to provide a structured approach for setting clear performance expectations. You have to have the ability to monitor progress and be able to evaluate employees, aligning individual goals with that of the organization. If you do not do that, then it means that you'll have people pulling in different directions. Then that will then be a challenge for you or for the organization. Sadly, in a lot of organizations, performance management has become like an activity to tick a box. We just want to be able to appear on the list of departments that have finished off with this. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the elements of performance management. The first thing and a key element that you need to look at is the performance cycle. Now, I did mention this in the Wednesday session, high level, that depending on the size of the organization and the complexities that come with it, you'll have different cycles where the more mature organizations have a performance cycle annually, where it's at the end of the year. It is probably tied to some sort of monetary reward, but then they have a review, a mid-year review, which sometimes factor into the total score or rating at the end, sometimes don't. Okay, so you need, as an organization and the number of staffing you have, you need to decide whether you want to do it annually or whether you want to do it quarterly or whether you want to do it half yearly. Then what happens with those that start at quarterly point, they can be able to graduate. As they mature, they graduate to half yearly and then eventually annually. I believe, in my own opinion and experience, that if you have too many of them, for example, at quarterly, there's going to be fatigue setting in. And also one of the factors is that it doesn't give time for the staff or management to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. There's not enough time. So you can find that the first quarter you appraise and the second quarter you appraise and factors are still the same. However, also depends on the complexities and the size of the organization. Now, it is important to do this to facilitate planning, monitoring, and as I mentioned, review, reward, if that is factored in. So that both parties, the appraiser and the appraisee, know exactly what is expected of them. And also, it is important to align with the organizational objectives. And you will find that sometimes at media, you'll find that the environment within which you're operating, you're expecting certain donations to come through, did not come through. So therefore, goals have changed. So that's the importance of having a review at media. The second element that you need to look at is goal setting. Now, this is really at the beginning, and this is a key foundational activity for performance management. So goal setting, best practice is goal setting should emanate from the strategic plan. Then it trickles down all the way to the shop level or ground floor. Now, how this happens is that there's a strategic plan for an organization that covers several years. So then leadership, including trustees on the board and the organization, the leader of the head of the organization, will then identify which areas of focus for each year. Based on the areas of focus for each year, the head of organization owns all those objectives or goals that the organization is supposed to achieve that year. Senior management will then plug into the head of the organization's goals so that they can take up those goals that apply to their respective departments. Supervisors or lower cadre staff will then plug into senior management. Then you'll then have a goal setting process that aligns to the organizational goals. The biggest mistake that some organizations make is that they develop goals at either senior level or at mid-level. So there's a disconnect between what the strategic plan is talking about and what the lower level cadre is setting up as goals. So that's very important. I'm sure you've heard of SMART goals. They must be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And of course, by who should enhance that, who should deliver those. And then obviously, there has to be goal clarity, drive and focus of goal so that everybody knows which direction they're going. So the benefit of this is that it enhances employee engagement and provides direction and purpose, and also aligns individual contributions to organizational priority. So that's very important. Now, the alignment in organizational culture and strategy is another element that is important, because this ensures goals and performance reflect the organization's values and long-term objectives. So it stresses. So this, if you adopt that approach, it will stress the importance of embedding organizational values into daily tasks, and also discusses alignment and strengthens team cohesion for strategic success. Now, this helps in creating a unified workforce working towards shared objectives, and also contributes to reinforcing the culture of the organization. Employee development. Now, a lot of times, performance management is looked at as the day of reckoning, where in some organizations it's used as a weapon. That's poor practice. However, it should also support in training needs analysis or areas of development, where it's supposed growth through training, coaching, and career development. So when you're seated, or the staff is seated with a direct report, they're able to discuss gaps and areas of improvement for them to be able to deliver organizational goals. And then the gaps is collected and contributes to the training need analysis process in the organization. So this increases employee retention by showing investment in their growth, right? It also enhances workforce capability to meet evolving business needs, and also, of course, personal development of an organization. While growing up in the world of work, I used to have a HR who used to ask me, look, if we train you in this organization, when you're leaving, your clearance does not include what you've learned. So training and development benefits the staff individually as well. Recognition and rewards. Now, this is a very, this requires a balancing act. I know for the NGO sector, I think I've had only once, I've rarely had monetary reward for performance management, because I believe it's not something that a donor would like to fund. Donors are ideally project focused. However, there's recognition and there's recognition of rewards beyond monetary. So the HR function needs to be creative, in identifying what non-monetary rewards would drive morale in the organization, so that you can factor this in into your performance management. Performance management, if done properly, also helps in addressing underperformance. There's something called PIP, or a performance improvement plan, that staff that are underperforming are able to be put on such a plan. It is time bound with very clear deliverables. However, it must have consequences, because if the moment one is put on such a plan, it means there's an issue, then that issue needs to be addressed. Or in my own professional view, if the staff is unable to rise to the occasion after being put on a PIP, then it's a case for separation, because it's not the performance fit is off. If you're not bold enough to take that decision, then there'll perennially be a problem in that organization. It is useful. Performance management is useful to prevent minor issues from escalating into major issues. So they can be picked up at that point at review level, media, or at the end of the end year appraisal, so that you can also listen to the staff and say, maybe one is perennially late, but there's a reason why. And the reason probably makes sense. So you're able to handle and address that outside of the disciplinary process. And then it also demonstrates the organization's commitment to fairness and employee growth. Documentation at the very tail end and record keeping is important, because performance management can also be a basis for separation, right? And a lot of organizations, and dare I say, heads of organizations would then tell the head of the lead for the HR function that, look, I want so and so out of this organization. I want them fired for non-performance. The reality is that if you do that and it attracts litigation, you will surely lose if you've not documented and you're unable to demonstrate a path or a history where you tried to help staff to improve their performance. And you can only prove that through documentation. So that basically covers the elements of performance management. Now, I want to address types of performance appraisal systems. Now, I've picked out 3. They are not by any means exhaustive. There are others out there, but in my view, I find a lot of the others very complex. Okay. Now, the first one that we want to look at is management by objective, which I'm sure a lot of you may have interacted with. This basically means objectives that are aligned to the goals I was talking about, all the way from strategic objectives trickled down. So objectives from that source are taken up and developed so that the staff performance is measured against those objectives. So this highlights the collaborative nature of the goal setting so that everybody is involved, all right? It is not good practice for a team lead or a line manager to set objectives on their own. They need to see, it has to be consultative so that it enhances the smartness of that objective. So there's input from both sides. And then it emphasizes the importance of tracking progress and adjusting objectives as needed, and also discusses the focus on outcome rather than activities. So typically a performance management system has to have a goal, has to have the activities at a minimum, then has to have desired outcome. Okay, so all other things are relative, but those are essential columns that you need to have in your system. So it also aligns individual efforts with organizational goals, encourages employee engagement and ownership of the tasks. Because you've discussed with them, they now know this is what is expected and have contributed, so they own it. And then enhances clarity in expectations and accountability. The next type of performance appraisal is the balance scorecard. Now, the balance scorecard is considered holistic because it looks at 3 key pillars. This is financial, customer, internal processes, then learning and growth. Okay. The challenge that I've seen NGOs having with the balance scorecard is mostly in financial. Because like I mentioned, the private sector would have the opportunity to measure revenue and costs, while the NGO space would have limited scope in measuring financials. It is there, it can be done, but it's limited. And as you go down the ladder or down the cadre, it becomes more and more difficult in measuring this. So I find that a lot of times, your space would rather go with management by objectives. However, the balance scorecard is a very comprehensive system because it provides a holistic view of organizational performance. It also gives a balance between short-term results and long-term growth. Also facilitates alignment of departmental and individual goals with strategy. It is very effective in making that alignment, and you can draw a straight line all the way to the strategic document. The third system is the 360-degree feedback system. Now, this 360 feedback system is basically based on multiple sources, including peers, subordinates, supervisors, and external partners. Then all those points, all points are then aggregated, and then you're assessed, the staff is assessed based on that. Now, it is good because it gives diverse perspectives from well-rounded performance assessments. It is also, there's the component, within it, there's an element of anonymity and confidentiality with regard to feedback. And then also there's a focus on behaviors and interpersonal skills. So it promotes self-awareness and continuous improvement, also builds a culture of openness and communication and trust in an organization, and is able to identify hidden strengths and blind spots. However, the 360 appraisal system cannot work in all organizations. And I do believe that there are very few organizations within the region that apply this because it requires a serious level of cultural direction. So you have to have, as an organization, you have to have matured with regard to values and culture of the organization for you to be able to effectively apply this. Because if you go into it and you're not ready, it will give you skewed outcomes, which will mislead decision making. Now, some organizations have decided to go to split this and maybe handle, call it 190-degree feedback, where they only look at peer feedback or subordinate feedback. Just some of the sources and not all the sources that contribute to the 360 degree. Now, there are some systems, like I said, these are the three main ones that I find that work well. However, there are some systems that I would call complementary, right? That you can be using the management by objective system or the balance scorecard or 360 feedback. But you'll find that management by objective system, for example, is objective focused. So it misses out on certain things like, the soft skills. So one of these add-on systems that complement the main ones include peer review. So you can have the management by objective system and factor in a peer review system as well, where the people you collaborate with, or as a program officer, you also have communications officers that you work with in your organization, so that you can be able to review each other's performance. Now that in my view is very useful, because then you know that you need to it molds behavioral patterns. So it brings in objectivity and fairness in peer evaluation, and it determines the success and failure of this system. It complements managerial assessments by providing additional insights and fosters team accountability. For me, that's the key win. And then it also encourages collaboration and mutual support among peers, enhances credibility of the performance appraisal system that you're currently using, because then it balances out. And then it also promotes shared responsibility in team success and teamwork. All right. The other complementary system is the behavioral assessment. You'll find that any appraisal system, you'll find that one section has to do with behaviors and the other one is objective based. So the behavioral system assessment system is also useful in focusing on evaluating specific behaviors that contribute to performance outcomes. It helps in identifying and reinforcing desired behaviors. It is applicable for roles. The behaviors directly impact results. For example, resource development. In my view, in your space, resource development or fundraising is a critical component of the NGO world. However, it's also one of the most difficult. If you're a gloomy person, like myself, you'd have difficulty going to sell the objectives of the organization so that you can get funding. So it needs someone with a certain behavior to be able to succeed in a role like that. Okay, so it drives consistency and encourages positive workplace culture, and also links behaviors to organizational values and strategy. Another system is self-assessment. You'll find that a lot of times self-assessment is connected to the main performance appraisal system. For example, in management by objective, you'll find that there's a column is included in the tool where the staff needs to self-assess themselves first, so that they can be able to give an honest feedback on where they think they are in terms of performance. Then a sit down with their direct supervisors to then perform the appraisal together. So the employee is able to reflect on their own performance, the goals that were set at the beginning of the period under review, and then establish areas of improvement. Now, if the staff is very efficient in doing this, or is very honest in doing this, it makes the appraisal process very easy. So it encourages ownership and accountability for personal growth as well. And then it also fosters a sense of responsibility and engagement. Another benefit is that it helps employees identify development opportunities and also encourages alignment between personal goals and organizational goals. Okay, I just saw a chat. I hope everybody can hear me. I just saw a comment in regard to that. And
Yeah,
then
I think there are some few issues of people hearing you, but probably it's on their end. If anybody else feels that they are not, they can't hear Greg's audio, please let us know so in the chat so that we understand if it's everyone or just a few. But Greg, you can continue. And just to alert you, we have 1 more minute before we can move into the Q&A, but I'll guide you.
Okay, fine. Now, the other complementary system that is used is one called forced distribution. Now, some of you may have heard of the bell curve. Now, bell curve is an age-old thinking. It's mainly based in the financial area, but it's used in performance management as well. So you will find that employees are ranked into predefined performance categories such as high, average, and low, so that if you map out that pattern, it comes out looking like a bell. So this is called the natural distribution curve. So it is believed that all results, if you take a bunch of coins and throw them up and they fall down on the ground, then ideally, if you map out the number that has come as heads up and the number that has come as bottoms up, they will form, and you plot that in a chart, they'll form a bell curve. So staff or heads of units are then told that your outcome must conform to this curve, or this distribution curve, right? So whenever they conduct the appraisal, they already know who is performing at what level. So it encourages competition and rewards high performers. Staff then feel that they need to fall under that category of high performers, or those that are low want to move to average before they move on up, and then it provides clear distinctions in performance levels for decision making, so that some organizations even have percentages of distribution. They say 10% will be low performers, 20% will be high performers, then 7% will be average. Then it is then decided if there's a need to cut down on staff, then the first that are being targeted will be the 10% that are low performers. So this forms the basis of that decision making. And it is useful for making workforce planning decisions like promotions or succession planning. Obviously, you'd then be focusing on the high performance for promotions and succession planning. Okay. I would like to move on to the group activity at this point.
Greg?
Yes.
Allow me now to interrupt you because
Yes.
there's so many activities that are going on the chat. And also because of time, I would want us to just go to the Q&A so that you can pick some of the questions and then you can answer them so that at least they can also be addressed, with your permission, kindly.
All right, please go ahead. Let's move on to, okay.
Perfect. Then allow me to invite Valeria to just read out at least 4 questions and then Greg can be able to answer them. Valeria, on to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Greg. So as Jennifer mentioned, there were some really nice conversations in the chat where they asked about non-monetary rewards, and I think they got a lot of insights on that. So I won't handle this question right now since the peers have already answered that. So Oringa Patrick is asking, how do you handle employees who think they're more technical and intelligent as opposed to very loyal and committed ones in an organization for effective service delivery?
No, say again.
How do you handle employees who think they're more technical and intelligent as opposed to very loyal and committed ones in an organization for effective service delivery?
Okay. The next one.
The next question is about please indulge on how to handle an employee who doesn't like capacity development to increase performance.
Okay. The next one.
The next one is from George Baya, and I also saw some answers to this question in the chat. It's about how to deal with an employee who has a narcissistic personality, specifically if they're in a leadership position, who can then have the potential to convince other employees towards a different direction, which is contrary to the organization. So how do you handle that?
Please repeat again.
How can you handle an employee who has a narcissistic personality and it's not open to feedback, especially if they are in a leadership position and they have the potential, to convince others otherwise?
Okay, I'd like to take these three first. I think the first one from Oringo that asks about employees that think that they are more technical and intelligent against loyalty. Now, the structure of the question, especially reference to think, when you say they think that they're more technical and intelligent, is it just that they think or it is a reality, right? So if they think that they're more technical and they're actually not, then it's an easy one, because it's a fallacy, and you'd basically focus on the actual output. Now, if indeed they are intelligent and technically adept, I think the most important thing is to be able to measure that with an effective appraisal system. And I can tell you that loyalty alone, loyalty is good, right? But loyalty alone, in the absence of technical ability, will not drive an organization. Yeah, but it then becomes it then becomes a balance. When and it's called talent management, it then becomes a balance between loyalty and the technical ability for the HR function or the head of the organization to achieve. Okay, there are those that are so, I've experienced staff that are so technically adept and intelligent, then it breeds arrogance. When that happens, then it affects the rest of the staff, who then step back and stop collaborating with the intelligent fellow, and then the organization suffers. So it requires a balance. But for me, and my opinion, I would try and get, if there's loyalty, but there is more than average technical adaptability, I would go for that instead of technical and intelligence with arrogance. Okay. However, the equalizer is an adapt, balanced, and fair performance management system, where you can be able to demonstrate, document, and provide, and as a HR function, you support the leader of your organization to make decisions based on very clear outcomes. And the next question is with regard to employee who doesn't like capacity development to increase performance. Look, in a lot of organizations, capacity development is not optional. It is something that must be done to equip the employee to be able to deliver for the organization. So this can be a disciplinary case, can easily be a disciplinary case, of course, starting off with as a minor issue, right? And this staff who doesn't like capacity development, he or she better be performing. And even if they are, it is something that cannot be sustainable in the future, because as things evolve and people go, organizations and needs change, and here is a staff that is not willing or is not does not appreciate capacity development, then there is a problem. Yeah, there are certain in my recommendation would be that certain capacity development initiatives in the organization must be considered compulsory. If the employee refuses, then it becomes a disciplinary case. The third question is with regard to an employee who is narcissistic and has a narcissistic personality and is in a leadership position. Now, it's not, I wouldn't say it's an easy one to handle, because you can't handle it unless the HR function can't handle it alone unless there's support from the top. So, because you'll find that if this individual is in a role that is a peer to the HR, the HR lead, or is above the HR lead, all the HR lead can do is to escalate it to the head of the organization. Like I mentioned in the previous component, if the person running the HR function receives a report or a complaint, it would be a failure for them not to escalate it, but it would it would also impact the rest of the staff if someone with this kind of profile gets away with it all the time. But it is subject to support from the leadership. Now, I'm saying this because I understand the real world situations of organizations, because there's a bit of politics that also comes into play, you see. But the best practice is seek support from organizational leadership. Valera, is there any other?
Greg, hi,
Yeah.
can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. No other question, but maybe I can share just a few comments from the other participants
Yes.
to some of the questions that you answered.
Yes.
Or maybe, yeah. So we have Michael Odeke. He was commenting on employees who think they're more technical and intelligent. He's writing, such require fine-tuning to appreciate the fact that an organization is an organism. It is composed of parts that ought to be complementary. An organization is a team from each according to ability and expectation. Intelligence is measured from one's ability to produce results with the support from others.
Great, great.
And then to the question on the narcissistic personality, we have comments from Catherine, who is saying that she thinks that organizing capacity building trainings for employees at all levels, maybe even performance contract, and stipulate what the organization expects from an employee. If an employee is difficult, you can do yearly contracts so as to terminate once the year ends if there is no change or effort to change. Yeah, that's all from comments. And there's a last question in the chat that we could take. Who designed to maximize employee performance in a service of an employer's strategy objectives? And this is a question from Nalukoya Lena.
I don't think I understand the question properly. Either you could ask if he can come, you can be allowed to verbalize it, or you can read it again.
Yes, we could ask Nalukoya Lena, could you be able to unmute yourself and explain? Maybe, I don't know if she's able to talk. We could take Michael's comment that has his hand raised. Michael, you have a minute.
Thank you. Hello?
Yes, Michael, please go ahead.
Greetings from Uganda.
Oh, nice to meet you.
I wanted to just boost you up that in the organization I work for,
yes,
we have been using the peer appraisal mechanism.
Right.
After realizing that when you use key performance indicators and performance appraisal, people perform to the dot, and yet relationships would be sour in one area. So we adopted the peer appraisal, where we ask people to submit 1 or 2 things that they appreciate of a person, and the other one is 1 or 2 things that they need a person to improve on. Because we are a peace organization, and we are conscious about the do no harm principle. So we usually ask just one feedback about the things that the person has done well and those that the person need to improve on, so that we build on the positives of performance. And it was a bit challenging at the beginning, because some people thought it would be witch hunting, especially those who had a sour relationship in the workplace. But eventually it has become appreciated, because people sometimes perform well in the area of delivering the required project indicators, and yet relationships are not good. So we borrowed a lot from the Johari's window.
Yes.
That as human beings, there are certain things we may not know about ourselves, and yet others can help us to discover such things. And then we have used this to build a team of people who work together for the common interest of the organization. But also people help others to grow on those things that they may not recognize as being deterring to a kind of a common good of everyone. So that's what we have tried to do. And I appraise you for bringing in the submission that peer appraisal can also go along with the other key performance appraisal. Thank you very much.
Michael, have you found marked difference before and after?
Yes, there have been a peer appraisal together with the other the management by objective have helped relationships, and people are able to support one another mutually. Where recognize the deficiency, people admit and accept guidance and support from others who might know 1 or 2 things on top of what their technical people know. So it has been supportive in enhancing deliverables and performance.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that input. That's very valuable from a real life situation. Valeria, do I have time for another question, or we move on to the final policy?
Thank you, Greg. We should move on to the final policy.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for their questions.
Okay. All right. The next policy is with regard to training and development. And this is, I think, one policy that I'm sure you're very well versed in. Albeit maybe from a capacity development perspective, where you usually deal with partners, external partners. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the training, that we would like to focus on the internal. Okay. So the purpose of our purpose for sharing this with you is basically to create and implement effective training and development programs that will align with the organizations and benefit the individual through career growth. Now, the universal purpose of such a policy is to enhance employee skills and to enable them to perform their roles more effectively. It aims at supporting career growth, improving job satisfaction, increasing productivity. Therefore, you'll have a more engaged staff complement, and by extension, a successful organization that meets its key objectives and strategic plan. Now, I want to go into the key elements of training and development. The first element, which a lot of people overlook, is the onboarding process. Onboarding is also a key training element, because then you're introducing the new hires to the organization's mission, vision, values, and culture. And then also you're training them with regard to the policies and procedures and job-specific expectations that you have, and also encourages, relationship building with colleagues. And it sets a very strong foundation for employees. And the output from that, if you do that properly, then you will reduce the time lag between time to productivity for new hires. So they get their feet on the ground a lot faster if you conduct an onboarding training effectively. Also builds confidence and clarity. And another benefit is that it promotes an early alignment with organizational goals and culture. Another element is the skills development, which focuses on continuous learning for development, to develop technical functions or soft skills if need be. All right. An example may include training in project management or customer service, as well as technical tools. This would help out the IT professionals. Also of importance is interpersonal communication, because your organizations interact a lot with the partners at different levels. All right. Some you may be supporting a group that consists of partners who have very little education or none at all, and this requires interpersonal skills, and it improves employee proficiency and job performance. All right. Another component of training, an element of training, is leadership development. This is basically geared towards preparing current employees for future leadership positions through targeted programs. Okay, so these are internal capacity building. Of course, you can have resources from external, but focusing on the internal resource. And then focusing on areas that include strategic thinking, decision-making, and emotional intelligence, including team management, which is critical for leadership. Some of the benefits is the organization will have a strong pipeline of capable leaders for future organizational needs, so that when you lose staff, you can easily roll over and you have continuity as an organization. Obviously, it will, applying this element will obviously enhance team effectiveness and promote strong leadership skills, and encourage innovation and vision alignment with leadership role. Okay, I will look at evaluation of training programs as a key element as well. And this involves measuring of success of training initiatives through feedback, knowledge retention, and improved performance. I'm sure you've gone through this before. Now, the key metrics may include pre and post training assessment. That's why we are keen that you participate in our pre and post training questionnaires. You populate them, and also employee engagement surveys. Evaluating training programs also provides insights into which programs are effective and which needs adjustment and which you need to drop altogether. So basically, it helps you redefine or design your models according to your needs and maximize outcomes. It also helps align training initiatives with organizational goals and promotes a culture of accountability and continuous improvement all around and in training efforts. The other key element is personal development plans. These are tailored plans that help employees identify their career aspirations and the skills they need to achieve them. However, it is recommended, and most organizations practice this, that if an employee, all personal development plans must be aligned to organizational needs and goals. An employee who's in programs cannot then start requesting for support to become an engineer. So there has to be an alignment, and the development must be collaborative between employees and their managers. And this ideally should include clear timelines, milestones, actionable steps for growth, and of course, there must be a trickle-down effect. You do know that based on the availability of resources, you cannot train everybody. However, when you take one resource in your organization for training, there are organizations that have very stringent trickle-down procedures where when they come back, they must share that information through conducting sessions with those who remain behind. Then you have a good, impactful training. Okay. Now, I want to delve a little bit, time allowing, on a training needs analysis and the importance of a training needs analysis. Now, remember that this comes way before you even start effecting these training initiatives that I've talked about, like leadership development and personal development plans. There must be a need that triggers those training plans. Now, one of the ways or one of the sources of training needs is performance management. You remember we spoke about appraisals, gap identification. Then from there, you develop, you establish a need so that you can be able to factor that into a training plan. So a training need analysis would ideally address performance gaps or meet donor requirements. There are donors who specifically want a certain skill or ability in that organization for them to be able to partner with you. So this would be helpful. It also provides focus and clarity to the process and ensures that the training need is aligned with the organizational priorities. Still in the line of training needs analysis, it is when you're going through the training need analysis process, it is important to determine who should be involved in the T&A process. This is training need process. So this would include management and leadership teams. It is recommended that employees are also given the opportunity to give their input, including field staff and program officers. Sometimes beneficiaries, donors, or partners are also included in this process. so that you get buy-in from all round. And then you engage the stakeholders to provide diverse perspectives on training needs. This really ensures buy-in the moment that you start executing the training, so that even the fellow, based on that comment we received, the fellow who is not keen on capacity building has an opportunity to give input, and you have basis for questioning his lack of interest in such an initiative of growth for the organization. Now, it is as part of training needs, it is useful that you're very clear on how you gather your data and how you analyze it to arrive at a decision that this is the training that is required in this organization. One of the ways is using surveys and questionnaires where you collect data from employees, managers, and stakeholders. You can conduct one-on-one interviews. There's the option of conducting focus groups so that you facilitate discussions to uncover shared needs or issues. Other ways of collecting data will include observations so that you have a real-time assessment of performance and workflows. And then, of course, the performance metrics. This is in reference to the performance appraisal, where you review the KPIs and identify the gaps. This is important because it provides evidence-based insights into training needs. And of course, that must be documented so that you can be able to support your decisions, and also captures both quantitative and qualitative data. Now, once you have this data and you've analyzed it.
Just to notify you on time, we have 2 more minutes.
All right. It is useful to categorize the training needs where you have a category for organizational needs, team needs, and individual needs. I think I'll stop at that and very quickly focus on another key component of training, and this is how to measure impact of training needs, of training. Basically, the training that you've conducted, how will you know that this has impacted and you have achieved your goal? So this is a very important component that you must factor in when you're developing your training and development policy. And then ultimately, you need to make each organization, in my view, must have a training program, an annual training program. This is useful for you to be able to plan, budget for it, and budgeting means you budget within the resources available, and so that you can execute them, or you can even use that and leverage that to source for additional funding. We will then move the Q&A based on time, time constraint, and hear from you with regard to training. I'm expecting a lot of input because this is an area you've delved in. So let's hear from input from the participants.
Hi, Greg. This is Valeria.
Yes.
I wanted to share just a message in the chat again from Michael. He's saying that at their organization, TESO Initiative for Peace, they have a practice where if any employees benefits from a training event, he or she shares highlights of such training during a staff learning event, which they usually hold once a month. Such of a sharing helps other staff to situate the training to their day in-out execution of activities. And they feel that this is a very good way of fostering the team spirit and the teamwork.
Yes, I have just a small comment. That's a very effective way of doing it. I know organizations that once they send you out for capacity building or training, and you come back and within a certain time frame, you have not shared that with your team or the staff, then the cost of that, as a repercussion, the cost of that training is recovered from you. That's a bit in the extreme, but it also happens. Go ahead, Valeria.
Thank you for that. And then there's Susan, who is asking, how best can we measure impact of training?
Okay. There are several ways of measuring impact of training. Because you remember at the beginning, you developed these training needs based on the training needs analysis. If that was the case, if that was the need, then measuring it would be very easy, because then you'd be able to have a look at the performance of that staff in that area of need. So some of the methods of measuring impact is using pre and post training assessments, so that you have a look at you're able to see whether there's been absorption in the training. Another way of doing it is by observation. You monitor behavioral changes in the workplace or the field. Another way is looking at organizational metrics. These organizational metrics include performance management. If at the beginning of the year or last year, a training need was identified, and during the year that was addressed, then it therefore follows that that staff must perform a lot better in that particular area for you to be able to basically establish that there's been impact. So you track improvements in projects, KPIs, efficiency, or stakeholder engagement and stakeholder input.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you to the other trainings that will be happening.